Okeoma, welcome to LSAT Unplugged.
Hey, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on.
So I was really excited to speak with you because you're actually a happy lawyer, or at least that's what the message that you're promoting. You've got the Happy Lawyer podcast. How did that come about?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So I, like a lot of lawyers, went to law school without really knowing why I was going to law school, and then became a lawyer similarly, not really knowing why I was becoming a lawyer. It was kind of seemed like the next step after law school. And after having my first two kids, kind of did the thing I should have done before law school, is I started talking to people who were lawyers. I got to that point in my career where I was wondering how I was going to fit it all together and what kind of the long-term goals were. And so I started doing a lot of informational interviews, and I was meeting with a lot of lawyers. And the only criteria I had for people who I was willing to meet with was, are they happy? Like, I didn't care if they were successful. I didn't care if they made a lot of money. I didn't care if their job sounded cool. The question I asked is, do you like what you do? Are you really happy in your life? And if the answer was yes, let me hear what you're doing. And so I started having these interviews, and a lot of them I was like, I don't want to do that. That is like, it makes them happy. It wouldn't make me happy. But I realized there was just so many nuggets of wisdom in there, and that there were so many things that people were saying that I was like, other people should hear this. And it would be so helpful to other people to know the secrets of happiness. And so my husband bought me a mic. We started recording those conversations, and the podcast was born. And it's been, almost 2.5 years now, and it's been doing really well. And it really inspires me to get to have these conversations on a weekly basis with lawyers, whether they're practicing or not practicing, but people who've really found happiness and are on the way to finding kind of real fulfillment in their life.
Wow, that's an incredible story. So you were just kind of looking at this for your own purposes, and then you found that the messages would apply to others. What would you say are the biggest things that do distinguish a happy lawyer from an unhappy lawyer?
So I've interviewed, dozens and dozens and dozens of lawyers at this point, and people who've left and people who've stayed. And one thing I've learned is that doesn't make a difference. It's not that people who leave are magically happier or people who stay are magically happier because they stuck with it. The code word I like to use is magic. It takes magic to be a happy lawyer. And so the M's are mindfulness and meditation. I think that happy lawyers tend to be people who are very aware and who are really good at managing their mindset and who don't get overcome by the stress. It's a really stressful job. And there's a lot of anxiety. It can be very lonely. And for somebody who has that mindfulness practice and that meditation practice, it's a lot easier to find peace in their lives. Then there's the alignment piece. They know who they are, and they're taking actions in alignment with those values and in an attempt to be that person. And they're not bifurcating who they are and their job. Because I think the people who struggle the most are the ones who are like, well, at work, I'm like this, but then I have this whole other life that's different from work. And so they're constantly trying to juggle between the two. When you can bring your whole self to work and really find an alignment between what you do and who you are, I think that happiness is much easier. Then there's the G, which is a gratitude. There are people who can put a positive spin on things, can be grateful for what they have, for what is working, who do reflect and say, even though this didn't work out, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have learned from it. Or I'm really grateful for the chances that I did have and the good things in my life that are working. Then there's the I, which is intentionality. And with that, I think it just comes down to feeling like agents in their lives, feeling like they have a choice, like they're not a victim of their circumstances, that they are picking to be a lawyer. Like nobody came and put a gun to their head and said, go to law school, get a good job, make a lot of money at a big law firm, and then complain for 15 years. Like they picked that. Every step of the way they made choices. And so they decide they're either going to stay on that track or they're going to get off. And either way, it's their choice. And then the last one is the C. And I think this is actually the hardest for lawyers. And that's calculated risk.
Wow, talk more about that.
People who are happy are taking risks in their lives. People who are happy are doing things that feel a little bit scary because there's a sense of joy that comes from accomplishing things that are hard. And not hard necessarily in the really objective way, but really personally hard for you to conquer. And I think as lawyers, we can be very risk averse. And people often will pick what they think is the safe, easy thing over the hard, risky thing because they think it'll make them happier. They think the security and the safety will make them happy. But what they get is they get bored. And what they get is they get this sense that they're letting themselves down. Because if your self is saying you should go for that promotion, you should push a little bit harder to go for that thing, but the action you're taking is it's too risky. It's too risky to put myself out there. It's too risky to jump ahead of the line. So I'm just going to wait my turn. Then you just start disappointing yourself over and over again and not being that person and not taking, and I'm not saying that people should jump off cliffs. I'm fairly risk averse myself, but you have to know, I think with all of the other things I talked about, if you are mindful, if you know who you are, if you know what your values are, if you're grateful for what's working, if you're intentional about the choices you're making, you should know what tiny risk, medium risk, might feel like a huge risk, but what thing that you could be doing that would get you from where you are to that bigger version of your life. But lawyers are so afraid of those risks, and they'd rather be stuck and complain, the unhappy lawyers, and say they don't have a choice than take that calculated risk and possibly fail.
I mean, honestly, this all sounds like great advice in general, really, for life, for career, for happiness overall. I guess I'm wondering, since our audience here is pre-laws,
Yep.
Is there something that you think folks could do earlier in life before they graduate law school, whether they're in college, let's say they're typically oftentimes a paralegal applying to law school, or they're in law school? What can they do now to structure their lives to be set up for happiness and success after graduating law school?
That's such a good question. And I love that question. And I speak to a lot of law school students, and I love having the opportunity to get people the right setup for success. And as you said, all these things apply. And what I see with law school students is what I did. I think people are looking outwardly for something to tell them what to do with their lives, as opposed to sitting down and really reflecting on, what do I like? What interests me in the law, and who's doing those things? I think what you see a lot of is people saying, I'm keeping my options open. I'm not sure yet if I want to do corporate or transactional, which is fine. I don't expect people to know that, but you do know if you like writing more than reading. You do know if you like research more than negotiation. Those are things that you need to sit in a room by yourself and figure out, because then it's much easier to have those conversations when you're in interviews and say, what's your day-to-day work look like? Are you mostly writing or reading? Are you mostly negotiating or researching? And you're like, oh, those are things I like, so I might like your job. But instead what people are doing is they're just saying, tell me what you do. You seem happy. You seem like you like it. Maybe I'll like it. Do you know what I mean? And I have so many people who will write me and they'll say, I think I really want to do transactional law. Should I apply for moot court? No. If that's not what, no. It's a waste of your time. It's not a skill set you need to build. If you know what you want to do, build the skill sets you want, get really good at what you enjoy, double down on your strengths instead of trying to create this well-rounded resume. As an interviewer, I was on the employment committee and I've interviewed hundreds of law school students for positions at big law firms at this point in my career. And the thing that I love to see is someone who says, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked these things, so this is what I tested out. And now I know I'm really interested in X, Y, and Z. Can I do that at your firm? And then I can say, yes, you can. Come and do it. But I think the people who seem like they're very much still on a fishing expedition, not necessarily for a job, but for who they are, is what worries me. Because if they don't know who they are, then I can't tell them if they're a good fit for my firm.
Right. So you want people who've done the homework first.
Yes. And it's not hard. I mean, it's difficult, but it's not hard.
But I think a lot of folks find it hard. They find it scary. I mean, lawyers, there's this association, they're type A, they're busy, they're intimidating. So if you're, let's say someone's a pre-law student, they're 20 to 25 years old. How do they take the steps if they don't know any lawyers? People often ask me these questions, and so I'm like, I'm not a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer. And they're like, well, how? Yep.
I think that's great. And I think that having done the homework helps you have those conversations. Because if you know what you're looking know what you're looking for from that lawyer, it's easier to reach out to somebody. Because when somebody says to me, hey, I'd love to get coffee, would you have time? No, I don't really. Do you know what I mean? But if someone says, hey, I've been really investing time in learning a lot. So I do aviation law right now. And they say, hey, I'm really interested in aviation law because I have an engineering background and I really enjoy doing regulatory cross-international work. I have a little bit of exposure to it, but I don't really understand how it works day to day. Would you have 15 minutes to tell me a little bit about what you do in your day? Absolutely. Because I think that, and I don't need you to have that level of detail, but you can see how that level of detail gives me an easy yes, because it doesn't feel like that person is putting all of the work on me. And I do want to feel like I will provide value to them. And so it's not just about me selfishly not wanting to do work. It's about me wanting to be helpful. And if you don't know what you like to do, you should spend some time looking at what you've done well in the past, what's made you happy in the past. And then you can just reach out to people. People love to share their stories if you give them parameters. People don't want to spend an hour while you kind of like go on about your life and how confused you are, but people are happy to jump on a 15, 20-minute call if they know what the call is going to be about, if they know that they can actually add value, if they know that you're taking it seriously and you're going to actually value their time.
Right. So you have to have your questions picked in advance, tailor-made to the individual, and do some preparation before you have the conversation and make that clear when you're making the request to the lawyer.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to, I know there's type A people in this audience, so I don't want to encourage people. You don't have to be kind of uptight and formalistic about it, but you do have to be intentional about it. And it can't feel like, that you haven't put any thought into it and that you just have a list. I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of form emails that are like, hi, I would love to know, this is my background. This is what I would like to know. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with me. I've never been in a courtroom in my life. So why would you? So it's really about taking the time. I think 3 good interviews with people who you've researched really well and whose work seems to really align with things you're interested in will go much further than doing 50 interviews with random people who would bother to say yes to a form email. And I think it's as simple as figuring out what you like and what kind of people you want to be around. Like if you like music, what do entertainment lawyers do with their day? Like maybe you'd like to be around musicians. If you like sports, what do sports, if you like helping people solve problems, like who has problems that you like solving? Do you like family problems? Maybe you'd like being a family lawyer. Does immigration really light you up? Maybe you should be an immigration lawyer. Every aspect of the world in which we live in has laws and rules and needs a lawyer to be in their court. And you could be that lawyer. But who do you want to support? What kind of people do you want to be around? And what kind of problems do you want to solve?
One thing that stood out to me earlier in our discussion is that you talked about fields of law, like maybe corporate or criminal, versus the type of work that one is actually doing, like research versus negotiation. So are you suggesting that maybe the type of work you're doing specifically in terms of writing versus presenting is actually maybe more important than the particular practice area, or are they both important? How do you kind of encourage folks to think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's much easier for people to think about that first set, like the skills that they like. And that's why I really encourage law school students to start there. And then you branch into the second, which is how do you apply those skills to solve real life problems? So if I like research and I like writing, I don't love speaking so much. I don't love, having to negotiate live so much. Then you think, but I also, what area of the world do I want to live in? I'm really interested in issues around housing. Like I love real estate. I love watching HGTV. I think that's super fun. So then you think, what in real estate law would allow me to apply those skills? So you start looking up real estate lawyers. You start looking, you start talking to people who've bought houses and say, did you work with a lawyer? Do you know a lawyer who may speak to me? I think that's the way you go through the process. And it allows you to focus in a lot more on those very non-traditional fields of law. I think so many law school students go in thinking, I'm going to be a litigator and work in a courtroom, or I'm going to go to corporate law. But there's just a whole other, span of things people do with their legal careers. And we don't really think about those things because they're not obvious to us. And the things that are made obvious are the ones that are not necessarily going to be the ones that make you the happiest. So start with listen to yourself first before you start going out to the world and asking the world what's available.
That's a really good point.
It's like making a shopping list before you go to the grocery store. You definitely don't want to go to the grocery store with no shopping list when you're hungry,
Yeah. That's a really good point. So would you mind just listing for us what those types of work that people do? Like, again, so there's writing, there's research, there's presenting, there's negotiating. What else is there?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, they're all the basic skills of any job. Like, do you like, and this is just thinking about how would you like to spend your day? Do you want to be sitting behind a computer all day? Do you want to be sitting at a negotiating table all day? I think if you start as simple as that, like when I get up in the morning, what does going to work look like for me? Am I going to a big building? Am I going to a small building? Am I working from home? Am I working with other lawyers? Am I not working with other lawyers? Like, it's really that basic. And in the course of my day, am I spending a big chunks of time writing? Am I breaking up my day doing all types of writing? Am I writing contracts? Am I reviewing contracts? Like, do you prefer, and this might be hard to know if you've never had a job, right? Like, if you've only been in school and you went straight to law school, you may not know these things about yourself, but you do know what in law school or in school you're drawn towards. Are you someone who likes making outlines? Are you someone who likes to plan ahead? Because transactional lawyers, a lot of what transactional law is planning ahead. It's managing a long-term project. Are you someone who hates doing that? Are you someone who prefers to do things last minute? Are you someone who likes to cram? And there are certainly areas of the law where things happen at a much faster pace. And so I would very much start with thinking about how you work currently. Is that how you want to continue to work in your career? What are your strengths? And how do you want to double down on those? Because from there, you can extrapolate from to really so many different types of practices and how to apply those skills.
That's a great rundown. Thank you for that. Do you notice that there are certain areas of law where lawyers are typically less happy than others on average?
So this is all anecdotal, so don't take this to, I do find that especially for women lawyers, litigation is harder than corporate and transactional work. And I think part of it has to do with the adversarial nature of the work. And it's also a little bit more institutional, because when you're talking about courts and procedure, it's a lot harder to just be who you want to be and do things the way you want to do them. And then when you're talking about being adversarial and advocating for your client, there is a level of tension that is always in your work. I'm a transactional lawyer, so my job is to get a deal done. So I'm trying keeping everybody happy. People are generally happy to see me because as a capital markets attorney by trade, when people come to me, it's because there's a big deal that needs to get done. And everybody's happy at the beginning of a big deal. And if you happen to close that big deal for them, they're even happier. So like there's no real tension. I mean, things get tense when there's close deadlines and stuff, but overall people work well together. And so I think when you think about those areas of law where there is more friction, so if you think about like matrimonial law, if you're a divorced lawyer, there's obviously going to be a lot more heavy issues that you're dealing with. And so it's going to become even more important that through law school and through your career, you maintain a really good self-care regimen, because you're going to bring that stuff home. When you're helping someone to decide what to do with their kids, when you're watching a family get torn apart, that's going to be hard. And if you don't have the skills to manage that and to deal with all of that pain and all of that stress, it will start to wear on you. And it's the same thing as, bankruptcy. When you're a bankruptcy lawyer, often you're dealing with people who are losing their business. You're dealing with people who've come to the end of their rope. And it's a sad time. People are losing their jobs. You're trying to save people's jobs. It's really, really stressful work. And so if you don't have the mechanisms to deal with that stress, you will internalize it all. And so I think I got very lucky that I was drawn to transactional work, because generally speaking, the stress is not of that nature and of that magnitude.
That's a really great point. Yeah, I could imagine that anything family related can get pretty intense.
And, likewise with criminal law, or when you think about immigration law, when people are, getting deported, or there's just all these issues that are really hard issues, that are really important issues that lawyers have the privilege to help people deal with. But in order to bring your full self and your best self to that work, you have to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I'm glad that you're kind of making that more real for folks. Now, your project, the Happy Lawyer Project, you've got
Yes.
the podcast. What else do you have going on?
Yeah, no, fantastic. Yeah, the Happy Lawyer Project podcast is a weekly podcast, and we now come out Thursdays. It used to be Tuesdays. And So weekly interviews of people who are happy, but also coaches, financial experts. I really want to give people all the resources they need to find happiness in their life. This year we started a money book club because I found that money was one of the things that really stresses lawyers out. And I, as a finance lawyer, love money, and I love helping people with their money issues. So that's super fun for me. And so you can join along at the hashtag is hashtag Lawyer Money Book Club. And so we talk about money books, we learn about money issues. And then this year, we're also going to start rolling out in-person book club conversations. So that's what we're really focused on right now, is helping people get their mindset right through the podcast and then get their money right through the book club.
Wow, that's great. It sounds like you're offering a great resource for lawyers to kind of help them with the real issues that they're facing. Now, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. If you want to reach me directly, follow me on Instagram. Instagram's where I live, and that's where you can kind of, I respond to every single message. I'm always happy to help. Again, try to keep them brief and direct so I can know how to help you, but I'm always happy to provide suggestions, to reach out to my resources and put you in contact with people if I know what you need. And that's at thehappylawyerproject.com. And then, of course, listen to the show for more about what I'm up to.
Great. And so the show, again, is the Happy Lawyer Podcast, available iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and all the other major platforms.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, Okeoma, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your sharing advice today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Steve.